meeting. We'll call a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. First item, roll call. Sue Cutherland. Present. Elsa. Here. Michael Kane. Here. And Kevin.
Here.
Is here. All right. So into our old business, we have our workshop. First one item is the data centers. I don't know if what you wanted to go over your input first, Jeff, or we could just go down.
He's got a presentation for you.
Oh, you do?
He does, yeah. And I just wanted to note the order of business tonight. We put short-term rentals at the end because we're very close on data centers and on cannabis. And data centers need to have an application in the works by the end of February in order to beat the moratorium. Otherwise, we're going to have to apply to extend the moratorium.
Okay, just share my screen.
Sure.
And per usual, this is not so much a presentation, but just a compilation on a screen of different questions, policy questions that we have remaining to discuss together. I had started with cannabis just because I think that's the one we are closest to putting to bed. We have a few more questions related to data centers. So with your permission, we'll start with cannabis. Goal is to wrap this up today. So fingers crossed, we'll have a good and speedy discussion. So not a whole lot left to discuss here, but wanted to go over the handful of changes that were made since the last meeting. If you recall, you all wanted to take another look at the different cannabis uses and where they would be permitted in which zoning districts. And by and large, you reconfirmed what we have had in previous drafts. There was one change, and that would be allowing cannabis microcultivators in the IG. And as a reminder, the logic at the time was you were already allowing full cannabis cultivators in the IG, so why not allow microcultivators as well? So we did make that one change. In terms of other changes related to conditions for consumer retail sales, so we did update the language. If you recall, we are talking about the language to waive the distance standards between protected uses and cannabis uses. And basically, we edited it to clarify that these permanent barriers are barriers that really are impeding pedestrian access. To make it clear, that's the point of this waiver, is if these permanent barriers are impeding pedestrian access. And per your direction at the last meeting, we did clarify for an interstate highway, we're really only talking about limited access highways. And we eliminated navigable from bodies of water because that seemed to be confusing. And, you know, it seems fair that we wouldn't want anyone to have to walk across any body of water. And that's a pretty obvious permanent barrier. So while there was some disagreement among the group as to what uses to include as protected uses, the general consensus and what we're proposing is to stick with the protected uses as they are defined in state law. So I know Hal had been interested in still protecting libraries, but we felt that might be too big of a stretch given the strict construction of the law as it was written. And then finally, I just wanted to note that we did make some text edits to hopefully improve readability and understandability. So I want to open it up, see if everyone is comfortable with taking this draft to the public.
Does anyone have any concerns?
Mr. Chair, this is Kevin. If I could offer one concern.
Go ahead.
Jeff Davis, could you just go over the definitions just very quickly of micro cultivator versus cultivator? Just that slight distinction.
I have to pull that up.
Thank you.
All right. Cannabis cultivator, a person or a business operated by a person that is licensed to engage in the cultivation, growing, and propagation of the cannabis plant at an establishment with not less than 15,000 square feet of grow space, as defined by state law. And then micro cultivator is basically the same, but containing not less than 2,000 square feet and not more than 10,000 square feet of grow space floor area prior to any expansion authorized by the commissioner. So basically, you've got 15,000 square feet plus for a cannabis cultivator, between 2,000 and 10,000 square feet of grow space for a micro cultivator. Again, these are state laws. We don't have any ability to play with those definitions, but we can play with where one is allowed over the other.
Yeah, so my only issue was they're in the two tiers, there's that gap. What happens between 10 and 15,000 square feet? That was my only issue. I don't know how to solve it, but
I don't know. I think that's where that last caveat comes in under the micro cultivators that says prior to any expansion authorized by the commissioner. Because I think the commissioner can allow an expansion of that up to 15,000 square feet. So it's, I talked to your lawyer, but my understanding is 2 to 10, definitely okay. 10 to 15 could be expanded with permission from the commissioner. And then 15 and above is a regular scale cultivator.
Got it. Thank you.
Is that like a special permit or something? Like, how would they handle that?
That's something the cannabis
have to
commission would
figure it
handle,
out.
and so yeah, it's not a local decision.
Oh, commissioner. I'm sorry. I
Commissioner,
heard you-
right. Sorry, not the commission, the
Okay.
commissioner, the cannabis commissioner.
These definitions are verbatim from the state
That's correct.
statute,
That's correct.
so they're really,
Right.
so
Right.
really can't change
Right.
things.
Exactly,
Hmm?
Correct.
that's correct.
So they wanted to leave some ambiguities in there for attorneys to
There you go.
make some. ease.
I guess just one question I had is when we talk about permanent barriers and we talk about interstate highways and permanent bodies of water and things like that, those seem like, yes, that's difficult, but active railway tracks, I mean, sometimes it could be pretty easy, having crossed many myself, I guess, and they don't always have fences, on each side or anything.
That's
So-
pretty dangerous though.
Oh, I'm not saying it's,
Oh, with electric.
yeah, but a lot of them are just pretty wide open. It didn't seem like as much of a difficulty to cross that. And plus there's places to cross it too.
Well, again, that's
But
why
it's
we
like-
added the pedestrian access issue. So obviously, if there is a pedestrian crossway over a railroad, for that matter, if there's a pedestrian bridge, say over an interstate highway, a limited access interstate highway, then that would no longer count, right? Because you have pedestrian access.
There is one stretch of train track that isn't fenced, and it's runs right through the IG,
Hmm.
the Pfizer link there.
Oh, yeah, there's spurs. Yeah, people would cross those because.
Yep.
It's sort of in a strange place, but I just wonder,
Is it a problem there?
well, I'm just trying to think if there's like
Yeah,
a
but-
Well, it's not a
or
barrier.
something there, then the parts of the IG could be either not allowed or
Yeah,
I'm
'cause-
trying to think of where it goes through.
Yeah.
It's
Because-
kind of, where Hertz is, say like
Yep.
Hertz or
Right. Yeah, it's not a barrier there at all.
But is that an issue with that? Because that's one of the things, that's one of the things that we have it specific to exactly where we have our railroads is where they are. Doesn't matter because we've got that barrier for the most part is what's stopping the school.
It's really Amtrak. It's really Amtrak.
But
You know.
that's true. But I'm just thinking
No, I mean,
where else does it affect these radii that we've
Probably
proposed on
doesn't,
here?
yeah.
And the answer is, I don't think it does.
No, I don't know if it does either, and I don't have the map in front of me.
Small copies if you want.
I mean, it was just, trying to poke a hole in it is all I was.
No, that's valid, but generally speaking, I would completely agree. Specific to our town. I don't think it matters because of where,
Oh,
Where they are.
Term Amtrak in front of it.
Yeah, so it's a totally different ballgame. Amtrak versus those little feeder things.
Yeah, the feeder ones, I don't think,
it just doesn't matter.
there's probably no,
There's IG on one side and IG on the other side of the
Yeah.
feeders, and why do we care?
But well, there's a lot of places to cross there too, so maybe the whole thing will be thrown out.
But-
But it's not being an effective barrier. You drive across it, I'll let you walk across it.
oh, yeah.
But the barrier we're talking about is the exclusion zones
Hmm.
posed by the radii around places of worship. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Where those exclusion zones are, there's only one barrier that actually matters much.
That's the school. And that's the main line.
That's correct. And that's quite a barrier. That's
That is.
a wall of China. And at such a time as it ceases to be a barrier, if in fact the train station goes in with an overpass and whatnot, from that point on, that's now, it will change what
It
they
will
are
change.
because of that,
That's
at
fine.
that time.
Yep.
Okay. One thing about just to clarify for the exclusion zone around the library, which was my wish. And I understand the idea that maybe that's too much of a stretch, so let me approach it. What I did like is what it did, honestly. It seems to be a good idea to not have cannabis for sale across from town hall, across from other things that we don't want it across from. And right now it would be allowed in that MVC zone. But if in fact if the library property was the thing that generated a circle, then it would exclude the MVC zone. Can we just exclude the MVC zone? We'll still
you
have the
want, yes.
MTC. And that would take care of it. That's actually what I was trying to accomplish, because we got an enormous affordable housing spread right there. It would be nice to not have it there.
Right.
I wish we could have imposed it and not had a liquor store there.
Hmm.
But we're slow on the. So if we just exclude the MVC, it's not a giant zone and there's still lots of places to put it. So it's not much of a restriction. I would vote for that.
Yeah, that's certainly an option if people would like to explore that.
Yeah, sounds good. Makes sense.
Showing me on this.
For town hall or the town hall's there, the school, the community center is there.
And that's all that's there.
And that's it. And there's a little strip of stores, some other businesses on the other side of the street that,
And what's the other? That's Aquatic Plains.
yes, green is McCormick Plains.
Doesn't look like any of these are allowed in the MVC. Am I reading this right?
Hold on, let me pull them up. I was taking their word for it that they were.
Thought it was MTC was.
TC,
It's not an MTC, but not
Oh.
M.
yeah,
Okay.
actually, yeah, you're right.
Well, work is
Right,
done.
not-
Okay.
Not allowed in the MVC anyway.
Great job.
I thought it was the
Yeah, Art,
MTC.
you are also smart. You foresaw this.
And that's a moot point.
Yes,
MVC, it's already not allowed.
It's already not allowed.
correct.
Okay, I missed that. All right, good. So actually, the effect that this has on the MTC and the CRs is not very much. Well, I guess it is up on the north side of Route 12, but it's fine.
And I guess does it have permanent bodies of water or is it just bodies of water?
Is a permanent barrier, which is described as a body of
Okay.
water.
Gotcha. All right.
We have temporary bodies.
Yeah, I mean, vernal pools or something like swamps
Tidal.
that might, tidal, yeah, anything like that.
Tidal water.
No,
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 permit,
there
but,
you go.
but,
I'm just asking.
yeah, but again, it doesn't.
It's not-
Ah, yeah,
All right, okay, we're
We're
good.
good.
Pretty limited this for you. I just, yeah, editorially, I think some of this should be cleaned up a little bit. Get rid of some of the shells where they're supposed to be required. Hmm. You know, it's in the, like the permit issue thing, the very last thing in there, I think is could be cleaned up a little bit. Like it has issued and then reissued it again, it's later, that type of thing. Not technical, it's just too many words sometimes.
Okay.
Well, if you streamline it, like if it's required, don't say shall be, and just say it is. Hmm? That type of stuff. So,
Present tense, not future tense.
yeah, well, in some cases, it has to be future when you need a state permit,
Okay,
then it makes sense,
then you shall do that.
yeah. Make it as clear as possible. People won't trip over a wrong word. So that one's ready to go. What we're saying.
That what you guys are saying, yes?
Yes,
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so my next step, I'm gonna run this by the town attorney, okay, before I put it in the application.
No, well, you want to send it out again for, do that and just,
Well, I think I wanna,
no, go to the town attorney.
exactly, and then we will show
And
you
then
guys.
show it to
time.
us.
Exactly, but Jeff probably doesn't need to be here. for
No,
that portion.
oh, no, he
Right.
doesn't.
Yep.
Me.
Okay, great.
Because the only thing we'd have is just change happy to glad type.
Okay. Mhm. Okay,
No, if it's limited.
Yeah. all right, that's great.
But it might be good just to have one more review before it goes to the public, because then you're stuck.
Right,
That's what all I was afraid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. good.
But technically, I don't see. I guess we don't see any issues to it.
That's great.
Hmm.
People worked on it pretty.
That's good.
All right, well, congratulations, everyone. We are 1 for 3.
33%.
Yep, 33%. All right, let's see what we can do with data centers this evening. See if we can get you to a
That's what
similar
you should
point of
want.
comfort. All right. So a few things to go over as a reminder from last month. So at the last meeting on October 27th, this group decided to prohibit data centers as a principal use and only allow them as accessory uses. I did want to point out, as I was preparing for today, I noticed a typo in your memo. Accessory data center should be marked as A/SP/C in the table of permitted uses, not AC, because they require a special permit. So just wanted to make a note of that. So in terms of the first thing I wanted to discuss with this, I won't go through the whole slide. This is more a series of remaining policy questions. And so this is the first policy question for you all in terms of the applicability for what counts as an accessory data center and when the conditions apply. So as this draft is written, any data center of under 1,000 square feet that's located indoors would not be regulated by these conditions. However, for any data center of under 300 square feet that's located outdoors, that would not be regulated by these conditions, although, of course, both would still be subject to administrative site plan review. So this is very conservative. We wanted to start low so that you're capturing as many of these data centers as possible, but we wanted to make sure that you were comfortable with this. And just for, you've been asking, like, what does this look like? So for that 300 square feet outdoors, that's approximately the size of a single 40-foot shipping container. So if you're doing something that's really accessory, it's one shipping container sized or smaller, and it's outdoors, we're saying you're not going to regulate that. These conditions won't apply. We're allowing a larger area indoors, because again, so long as that's happening indoors, and it's at that smaller scale, suggesting you don't need these conditions. So maybe you can answer this question now. Maybe you want to go through what the conditions are before you feel comfortable answering this question. But generally speaking, do these size triggers feel right to you?
Well, did we happen to survey some of the major companies in town to see what they actually were using or had under the
Well,
same
I
building?
have a problem with just using square feet. I mean, the objective is to make sure we don't have adverse impact
Mhm.
outside of the data center or where it is, in adjacent properties. And also measuring space may be used for other things. I mean, it may not be one just limited to computer processing in that building or facility. And I think we should be looking at something more like power. Somehow we've got a difference between, say, a high-end computer that you can, an individual might buy or a small business might have. Until somewhere in that area where you don't want to control it, to where it gets into a bigger unit. And I was wondering whether it makes more sense that you can't supply the power and say I'm using 110 and maybe a couple of hundred amps, you can see, say in a house, maybe you do want to have rules apply for it.
No, for sure. I was just curious if that was even a reasonable size, because I really don't know. If you take an electric boat or a visor, I was just curious, even space-wise, is this something they do contain inside one of their buildings? And is it under 1,000?
Well,
Yes.
he doesn't have that. They use a vendor, and the vendor has
Okay, well, that's good to know,
extra facility.
right?
But I was told that when CSC was doing it, they had that within their building.
Right.
Actual computers,
Hmm.
but they provide a computer service.
Right,
Which I think is something we have to address in the definition.
right.
Data center
Because a lot of
Or,
them do use that, right?
is an accessory data center.
Right, and of
What
course,
that really means, and I don't think that's too clear. But and in the future, things may get more compact and use less
Absolutely.
power and have less effect.
they have, so,
I
right,
have over it.
right.
Is it I mean, I understand why you want to regulate power. You think it might be a better measurement, but is that the offending thing that we want to measure? The offending thing?
No,
Small
that
or
would
small
be the trigger.
Well, that's what I
That
understand.
would be the trigger to say it comes under these regulations.
Understand,
And
but
the regulations control whatever it is, power, noise, whatever.
but the kind of reality would be, okay, now I have something that uses 10 times as much power, but suddenly I've got some solid state thing that we'll have that's absolutely silent and nobody cares about it. But we're still going to regulate it because you have the trigger. And I'm saying maybe it's the wrong trigger. Maybe the trigger that makes it obnoxious when it's the small, we're talking about small things. The thing that makes it obnoxious as a small thing is the air conditioning. And you can measure the air conditioning. You can come up with some measurements of BTU or something like that. So that's on the labels, in fact. So maybe we could come up with something like that. That would be the trigger that would make the thing obnoxious, not the amount of power that's used. Now, understand the power that's used is just a number, but that makes it really easy to know what they provided for a unit is the BTUs.
I would say I will make one comment, then I'll turn it over to Kevin. So as a general rule, we try to discourage communities from, particularly in zoning, using, this is the same conversation you would have about renewable energy, wind energy or solar power, basing your regulations on output that's not really what zoning is for, because that is no longer a land use issue, right? So I would say if you are concerned about, if you're very, very concerned about this, then you just have the conditions apply to all of them regardless of size. And the nice thing is, the smaller it is and the less of an impact it's going to have, it's going to be super easy for them to meet your conditions. I just wanted to give people sort of an out for the very small ones. But if you're concerned that, hey, even the small one might be super loud and you want to make sure that those noise standards apply, then you can have them apply regardless of size. And with that, I want to turn it over to Kevin.
Yeah. So since our last workshop, I did a lot of work on the different tiers and subject to square footage. And I apologize for not being able to finish it, but I will forward it this week to the workshop team on both square footage and power. And I think as we've just gone down this road, you don't see, like, when we get into the tiers, they're not really broken up by that. They're broken up by how they are built, the type of reliability they have, the type of service that they provide, much more than what the regulated use is. And in fact, I didn't find anything regarding square footage or power in that particular regard, other than some of the tiers require, of course, dual separate power sources from different parts of town. But I agree with Jeff, and this is, if I wasn't articulate enough in our last one, is that I believe that we should not go down this road as far as square footage, and therefore we put everything, as Jeff just described, is that it's a permitted use, I believe we call it, right, Jeff, for all. No,
I'm not exactly
we
sure what you're.
tiers, can we use these tiers? Are they defined and use that as?
So,
Yes,
and I'll send them out to people. I don't think they are, Jeff. I don't think they define what we're trying to, as a planning and zoning commission, are trying to attempt, right? They talk more about how they are built and the type of reliability that they have. They leave off big issues such as sustainability, for instance, right? So I guess my point is, if I was following Jeff Davis correctly, I say we don't put in this, and everything needs to be, what do we have it here as? Sorry, I just been sick all day here, but we're basically saying that it's not a permitted use, it's by permit only. Special permit only, yes.
So we
Right.
want to
It's by
say
special permit, and they all, I mean, then you could just say
Yeah.
that these standards apply to all of you, and the smaller you are, the more likely you are to comply.
where you make the distinction between your desktop computer that may be under the table. Where do you make the cutoff between there and where you have a data center? That, I think, is something we have to understand.
So remember,
really
there's
is
a difference between what your computer is using, when you've got a computer that you're using for computing purposes versus a data center that is storing data. And I think that's
data center. Yeah, but it's processing data, not
Yes,
necessarily storing. And
so that's why we use
are
the
you
state
just saying if you
definition.
have two separate units, that becomes a data center? I mean,
No.
some of these computers you can buy off the shelf are pretty powerful today. And where do you say it gets to the point where it becomes something that requires a definition as a data center?
Right. So Jeff's saying, is there a minimum bar in any of the tiers that I've looked at, or any other definition that is that minimum bar for a data center, and everything else, maybe a server closet, of course, something along those type of lines. And for the moment, I don't have that, Jeff. I don't know if Jeff Davis has anything like that with that minimum bar.
No, I mean, again, I think I've mentioned this before. When you
Yeah.
look at things that people consider to be data centers tend to be at least 10,000 square feet. Like maybe you'll see some at that 5,000 square foot level, which is why, we initially used that as the cutoff point between accessory and principal. Like beyond that, it's just not, it's not producing, it's not using the same amount of water, it's not producing the amount of noise. It's just something that people have, you know, like I said, in a large room within their company normally, or in, you know, a container, shipping container size structure outside of their building. I mean, just, you know, less than that. So by saying 1,000 square feet, you know, no, there is no practical connection between the 1,000 square feet and what's actually used. What that does is it protects you from anyone having something that's really a data center. And then also you have to think about the practicalities of implementing this and enforcing it, right? Like your zoning inspector is not going to go into someone's house to see what kind of computer, like it's going to have to be, you know, built for that purpose and come to you with that as a use for anyone to even notice that this is happened, right? And that's where you talk about that line between what's really regulated under zoning and what needs to be, like, you know, a building code issue or you know, a health code issue. And I know you're trying to protect against all of those things, but sometimes zoning isn't the place to do that. But back to the point, if we just lifted the square footage triggers, you know, what gets enforced is what gets complained about, and anything that's smaller is not going to really hit your radar from a practical perspective.
Yeah, practically speaking, the way that our department would catch this is when somebody applies for a building permit. They're not
Right.
going to apply for a permit if they have 2 CPUs under their desk,
No,
right? I mean,
No.
so otherwise we wouldn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
Here's a building permit.
Yeah.
and they ask,
440.
planning.
No, or if they're all scattered all over the building, right? So I think that my feeling is that a lot of this stuff is gonna fly under our radar. And that's probably just what's gonna happen. But I mean, as planning and zoning, it seems like square footage, someone comes in with an application, that's an easy thing for us to measure. And to know what's going on. You know, with electricity or BTUs, someone could throttle it up, throttle it down. You know, and
Yeah,
or
that's constantly
change
changing.
it and we wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
Whereas the square footage seems like something that, you know, is observable. I don't know.
Maybe we just say any building that is designated as its primary use as data processing. Be the,
But then we're not under,
not a lot.
We're not allowing. them.
yeah, we're not allowing that.
Right.
It's going to be an
No.
accessory.
accessory.
Yeah,
Wait, I disagree with that, because if you have a building, say an office building, some building like that, you may not want to have your data processing stuff in that building and may put it in a separate building, which would be a separate building just for that use. And
As long as-
maybe
Right, as long as it is accessory.
an
to the-
accessory to the,
Right, okay,
yes,
yeah.
but it's a separate building.
Yeah, okay, but it's an accessory use.
I,
Primary, yes.
yes, I agree with that. That's not a problem,
Yeah.
yeah, but maybe that's the way to control it, just say any building erected for that sole purpose would come under these regulations. That would be, because the accessory isn't going to be necessarily on the same lot even.
Well, that's what we need to talk about, because it is, I
And
think
here we
the way
go.
it's
Well,
written.
I think there's some problems.
Well, I don't disagree. I'm just saying, if we're talking about data center accessory now, right?
No,
So then, I think it's good to go over the language of that definition, because I think it does need.
no, but the accessory is not the primary purpose for a data center. It's the end use, but if we're building something that's gonna have the primary purpose of that structure, physical structure, is a building just to house data processing.
Mhm.
then it comes under this jurisdiction of these regulations.
Well, that's why you have the two things on the one lot. You could have see,
It
that's
could
why,
be on the same lot.
well, I was like, what if you had an
Or it could be
ice
on
cream
a-
store that had a data center that was huge next to it? you
Well,
know?
it can't be huge
But
because
it's-
we have the ratios.
But that's right, but then you have, the lots have some limits.
Well, the lots have physical size on the buildings today, and any,
Right. Yeah,
but it's just what's a data center and what is just.
but it's talking about it being an accessory and that it has some relationship to the other building.
Yes,
It could be their data center, but it's their data center. It's not
it
all of a
doesn't,
sudden
who cares?
southeastern Connecticut.
no, it doesn't make any difference where the information comes from. It's just how do you classify it? And who owns it and runs it?
Well, it does in our definition. I think it
Yeah.
makes.
No.
sense. Plus,
So
I'm not,
based on conversations from you all in the past, the general consensus was we only want this if it's supporting
Yeah,
the use
right.
on site. So that's how it is written currently.
but it can be a separate building
It's in a
supporting the
separate building.
use.
It could be
on
a separate
site.
lot. Like you've got that facility that was in the old school building in Groton in the city.
Hmm.
They might want a data center to process their data.
Mhm.
Don't know how much data they have. If they're a technical or engineering outfit. So they may not be able to put it in that building and want to put it in a building. It could be a block away, who cares? It is a data center used only for that purpose. It's an accessory to the main function. Or like, say the Yukon or Pfizer's campus, they may want to have a data center. I'm not saying they do. I don't know how much data they have. But they may want one.
Is this,
Does it have to be in the main building? It could be a separate building.
No, but there you have a campus. I think where you have the situation,
But
you
it
have
could
one
be-
thing
it could
here,
be
and
on
another
campus.
thing over there.
Or you could be off campus.
Well, that's why
Like
I don't think the
EB
definition.
EB has buildings scattered around, scattered around town and into London. But they may want to put, they could have an accessory data center in the town of Groton that supports all that stuff.
is this a language problem? I think this goes to Kevin. I think we have a language problem. What we want the data centers to do. We want the data centers, there's a name for it, when they are dedicated to one business. That's what you're going
All the accessory data.
Well, but,
Right,
but
But
that's not the way we use the word accessory. We use accessory as if it's part of the accessory to the property one. So it's an
Yes.
accessory data center, but if it's elsewhere, which probably we're saying maybe that's okay. But I think there's a term for that when it's not open to everybody. It's built for a particular usage that's more or less adjacent in some way. It's dedicated.
It's dedicated to that business, right? So
Right.
I don't off the top know that word. I mean, I thought accessory was a good word because I felt it was defined within a planning and zoning parameter, right? But there may be a better word. So maybe that's while we're trying to finish this tonight, maybe we need to search for that word, which is, that is specifically designed for the business that is on the same campus or adjacent campuses or something like that. But
I think
I
we've
don't
got
have,
pretty good language on that now. The
Yeah.
main issue is whether or not you want to allow them only on the same property as the principal use, or if you're okay with them happening anywhere, so long as the principal use is, I mean, not anywhere, but according to where you're allowing them, so long as the principal use is in the town of Groton.
That's what
That's what you're saying, Jeff, right?
yes. Well, I don't
So-
want to
so-
have restrictions that aren't needed. I mean, our real concern, I think, is over having a very large data center.
Right.
How do we
Right.
define that? That's what we're trying to prohibit.
it's
So we're saying
true.
it's an accessory use,
It's
doesn't
the-
necessarily
use.
define within the same property. It's an accessory use.
But if you had a business on a 1 acre property and you also own a 10 acre property and you said, I need a data center and I'm gonna cover up that 10 acres as much as I can.
No, you can't.
Remember, you still can't do that. There's
See,
still the
can't do it.
absolute cap on these
Why
things.
not? Why couldn't you do that?
Because we have an absolute cap on the size as currently.
Right, we have a
Yeah.
size relative to the.
Well, that's what I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
People are talking about getting rid of the square footage and things like
No,
that.
because you're.
No, so
triggering-
this would be getting rid of the trigger, the lower end square footage trigger, but we would still maintain the upper end cap. So right
Size,
now,
yeah.
it would be 20% of the gross square footage area, or 10,000 square feet, whichever is less. So we're looking at a
Okay.
maximum 10,000 square feet, no matter what, even on a very large property.
Okay,
Okay, and so like if some, well, I mean, if we're talking about something off-site, then something like electric boat, you measure electric boat by, I mean, there's acres and acres of buildings there, right?
Doesn't matter, they only get 10,000 square.
Yeah, that's it. So
Exactly.
that's what,
That's
it's still
right, so
limited to
that's a
10,000
cap,
square
yeah.
feet, right?
right,
Okay.
that controls that.
Per property that it's put upon.
Yes, and that's a failing here. So how many of those could they do?
Yeah, well, that's what I like, try to look at the cumulative effect, you know, when you start.
Yeah, but it triggers the regulation.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. So it triggers this regulation.
Yeah,
And once you're in the regulation, that should control.
That's true.
everything. It would
that's true. And
be
you have to do net zero and
harmful.
the sound and whatnot. So,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, and so like if what Kevin was talking about previously, these tractor trailers that they bring in and stack one next to another. They are not treated as, are they treated as one building or are they cumulative?
Good question.
I had a problem with that too, is that
Yeah,
if in fact they say, okay, we have one of those, we plugged it in. And now I want two of them.
Yeah, it's like having a shed in your yard, right? So then I can have 5 sheds and I can have 200 sheds in my yard.
stack them up.
Until I get up to 10,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right, and
just something to think about.
But you
But,
could,
but so long as when we get, once you put the second shed up, now that's a trigger if it's on the same property.
well. why
And
wouldn't it be
remember,
if
you're
it's
under,
under
and I
10,000?
have
Yeah.
a recommendation. This was not in my draft, but there's something else I saw today that I just wanted to make clear is that the underlying, dimensional standards and building coverage still apply. So it's not as though all of a sudden by saying, okay, you have the right to build this, you have the right to build beyond the footprint that you're allowed per the underlying zoning, right? So it still has to be able to fit and meet all those standards.
We just want to make sure that we have the 1,000 square foot and the 300 square foot measurements, which might be fine. But then we just want to make sure that two of them adds up. If you have two tiny little lots, and you end up with one of these 300 square foot things that fits, and then right next to another 300 square foot things, we now have this concentration of these trailer sized things with nasty air conditioning systems that haven't triggered anything, and we want them to trigger.
Right, so you could take a look, right? You're right, Hal. So say you have 300 square feet. How many therefore could we fit under 10,000? The answer is 30.
And they'd be nasty.
Well,
So we
Yeah.
need it, by the time you get the second one within a certain area, we need that trigger to kick in. And then it'll be okay.
So you want to use.
Well, I mean, the other way of wording this is rather than just saying, a data set, any data center of 300 square feet, but like 300 square feet of data center space. And I don't care if
There
that's,
you go.
in,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
it.
that's,
Probably better.
Yeah. That's it. It's the cumulative effect is what we're
Right.
trying to
Right.
protect ourselves from.
Right.
okay.
This would apply to new buildings.
So I can
If it's
try rewording that.
Any new permits? New permits.
To make sure that it's clear this is cumulative and not based on the number of structures. But let's get back to that question that Jeff had, because there is an accessory use is on the same property as the principal use. So we would have to come up with a different way of describing this. And again, I think we have the language already. It's really just a matter of that policy decision. Do more of you feel that this can go anywhere so long as it's servicing a local business. Or how many people feel still that, no, I'm only comfortable with this if it's co-located on the same property as the principal use.
Around with that. I'm okay with it as long as it's dedicated to a single business, and that will limit the
Yeah.
size.
They could run a piece of fiber 1,000 feet and the answer was it's on a different campus, but you know, it's okay as long as it's dedicated. I'm just picking to Pfizer. That's okay as far as I'm concerned.
It's really the size of the data center facility.
Right.
That's.
It doesn't suddenly make us want to do acres of
I
data.
want to make sure we aren't putting out rules that we don't need.
Yep.
And that might hinder somebody in the future.
But then, would we say they can't go into the industrial zones? If in fact you could put it in
No.
another lot,
No, it would be,
then you could put it
Maybe-
anywhere, right?
no, it's,
But I mean, you could put it
it's
industrial.
trigger the rules for the data center. Apply across the board. It's just, what's a data center? And where can you put it?
And they're only accessory.
And
Anyway,
they're only accessory. What we're saying is everything's accessory.
it's gotta be whatever, 20.
So it's an
But it could
accessory.
be,
10,000 feet.
but it could be an accessory way over in another zone.
But it's
under-
accessory to the business.
That's what,
Accessory to the business, not
And
to the
not,
structure.
not to the lot, yeah.
The way we usually think of an accessory.
Do we have, is that allowable in like what, how we define an accessory?
Well, again, it's that you can't call that accessory. That is no longer an accessory use. I mean, well, let's put it this way. It's not, I don't know. I want to talk to the lawyers about this one, about how we word this to avoid confusion. Because it's still an accessory use because it can't just happen on its own. But yeah, I don't know. We need to make sure the wording on this is legally
Might
sound.
be something like dedicated use or something.
Yeah, exactly.
well, the same with that first sentence under the definition of data center accessory, where you use the word incidental. I mean, I think that needs to be changed maybe to necessary or something like that, or somehow related to the principal use.
I mean,
Mr.
if
Frank.
Because
you're
you have
uncomfortable with
accessory in there.
that, I would just get
Yeah,
rid of the word altogether.
Yeah, incidental is not good because it may be it may be
Oh,
necessary.
yeah, they're not good word. It's not a good definition, I don't think, yeah.
Yeah, it's not really, I guess it's really not really accessory to its necessity.
Yeah, I don't think accessory is clear at all.
Yeah.
What we,
Do you really want to go there? Do we care? I mean, if they want to have one. And it's for their business.
I want to
We-
give it to
We don't want to get into, do you really need to have this?
No.
No, so.
No, we don't want
Right.
to say that. It's not our
I think we
call.
changed it. But again, we've kind of shifted, or at least my understanding of how you want to treat these is shifted. So I think we changed the definition, as you've suggested, to, you know, a data center that is dedicated for the use of a business within the town of Groton, or something to that effect.
Mhm.
I mean, it still would have to be in an allowable zone,
Of course.
even
yeah.
if it was a, yeah.
Yes, everything kicks in, right?
Yeah.
You could arguably end up with structures that are enough data center to supply every business in Groton, and that would be okay.
It
Still
would.
won't be acres of data center, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you gotta be careful with definitions between a data center and whatever you call these dedicated data centers. It's fuzzy the way it's written up.
it is.
I think the way that you want to do it in table 4 isn't the way everything else is done, in that you wouldn't put data center down with an X through it for everything. It's goes in under data center and then you have the A/C or something like that.
You're looking, what are you looking at? You're looking at the chart.
Definition, data center and data center accessory, I think are confusing the way they're presented here. In the way they're called out in table 4 isn't consistent with the other uses for accessory use.
How so? Can you explain that, Jeff?
Well, if you look at the other ones, you would call it a data center is across the board, because an accessory data center is a data center, the way you have it. And the way they've done it for other uses, since it's prohibited, say that the big data center, you would not put it down as a separate line, put it as X in all the different zones, put A/C. How they've done it. Or other uses, other accessory use.
Okay, so we can just say that I'm certainly happy to structure it that way.
Well, otherwise it's confusing, because the accessory is a subset of a data center. It's still a data center. It's just has a different. use.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
subset of a business.
another way to do it. Yeah, that's how it's done with a number of
Right.
other uses on the table. Yeah, we'll just need to look at the definition of accessory use,
Yes,
because it is on the same lot.
well, you may not want to use that term.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it screws up everything.
No, we can restructure that to just, we get rid of the definition for accessory data center. We just call them data centers. And as you said, we mark them as ASPC in the use table. And then we have a new section on data centers as opposed to accessory data centers, but we describe what type and size of data centers are allowed.
Sure.
And then we can just skip the terminology accessory altogether. And describe this situation where it has to be dedicated to the use of a local business. So yeah, I think we can definitely restructure this in a neat way. Is what I just said reflective of what you were hoping for?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I would say is when you have, is what you just said, if it's the use in Groton, so like you get a company like Pfizer that's international, right? Or something like that now. What, I mean, we don't have anything that goes.
I don't think you want it.
We don't think we want to do that.
I don't think you have to worry about it.
Yeah, okay,
It's not here.
Because there's no advantage to Pfizer in
yeah, all right,
having a server here.
yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. Just. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think you'd want to spend the cost.
No, or New London, right?
No,
So they have,
Right?
they have New London, right? And so they might be using, would they,
They don't have the one. EB has no one.
oh, well, that's what I'm.
So EB could do it,
What EB would do.
would still not be. that bad.
If it's small enough,
Yeah.
it's small.
Okay, it's still gonna trigger our
They'll trigger
sizes.
everything else.
That's fine.
If we have
Okay.
the rules. So
Sure.
and keep things under.
Give me a second while I take notes. All right. I think that direction makes sense to me, and I can definitely turn that around pretty quickly. Let's see if there are other things. So two of the other topics were noise and sustainability. For noise, the first draft that you saw said that the ambient noise levels could increase no more than 5 decibels. This draft is stricter and allows no increase in existing ambient noise levels. And as prior, that has to be demonstrated before a certificate of occupancy is released. We acknowledge that we're putting a pin in revisiting townwide noise standards, and that that's something that you'd like to address.
There's a difference between a townwide standards and a data center, and the data centers there are 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that would be a lot more annoying to a residence than a business that's there where the residents might not even be in there.
Yes, but a noise standard is a noise standard, and it's going to stop someone from making 24-hour noise regardless of what use you have. That's why, you know, the statewide standards have different decibel levels for nighttime versus daytime. And of course, those would still apply. The way we have this written is that under no circumstances would they exceed those state standards. And this, again, we would just say no increase above the existing ambient noise levels. And under the circumstances, without addressing noise townwide, I don't know that you can say a whole lot beyond that. You're not going to decrease, make them decrease the ambient noise level.
But it's only applies to areas adjacent to residential use, right?
At the lot line.
Lot line.
It only applies to any that abut anything other than an industrial zone. So it does count in the commercial zones as well.
Right.
But I guess one question I had on the noise, I have several questions, but it can't be at one point in time with noise, because if you do a lot line measurement, it changes, you know, throughout the course of the day and night. So how are we going to put this so that in fact at night the noise isn't higher or something, and during the day it happens to be the same?
I think you have two things. I completely agree, but you just need to add a little more definition. There's two parts. One is that it is as measured over time throughout the day. So it's got to be relative, not nighttime and daytime, but throughout the day, throughout the week, whatever it normally is, hour by hour throughout the week. That's what the target is.
Yeah.
And the other one is that the just term noise level needs to be a little more defined, just because level is generally measured with dB meters. And that's not going to do it. It's going to measure with dB or dBA, which is the standard hearing thing. And that doesn't address nasty little spikes and whines and things like that, that will drive someone crazy. It has to match the ambient noise, is much more specific with exact wavelengths we're talking about. It's all achievable, so it's not a crazy thing to do, but unless you ask them to measure that to actually match the wave signature of the ambient noise. If you don't ask them to do it, they won't. They'll take a reading. They'll say it's 65 dB at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's what they have there now. And so you're good. But if it won't match up once you zero in on the different wavelengths.
That's right.
Mhm.
So it should be at least hourly.
So it doesn't need to be more than an hour, but hourly is fine. And I think it's very achievable. And more than just the level, you need to specify something about the wavelengths. I'm not sure what that language is, but there must be something.
It's similar. The white noise has to be similar.
That's exactly.
That's right. That's right.
And across
The buzz.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
it can't
The
be.
thing that makes a buzz,
It's more than just.
that's a buzz, but not white light, not noise, is that there's certain peaks in certain places. It's oddly enough, it's exactly like fluorescent lights over modern LEDs. Why do they always look weird? It's because it's not smooth wavelengths. It's all little spikes. That's what makes you kind of wince at them. And for sound, that's the big thing, not just what the total dB is.
Would you like this measured hour by hour over the course of 24 hours or over the course of a week?
It's
Oh,
gotta be across the week.
I think it has to be,
Yeah,
I think it has to
I
be
think
across
so.
the week.
absolutely.
I mean, well, yeah,
It's less-
it could be weekdays and weekends, but it's considerably different. So
I think over the course of a week, because they only have to do it to get their certificate. So
well, the initial measurement, we'll have that on file someplace. We're not changing it constantly.
It seemed like they'd have to run at full load, something along that line, right?
That's true too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Including backup power, however that is being generated.
Possibly. We want to give them a break for emergency power as opposed to backup power.
Everything's an
Well,
emergency.
That's a funny thing, because we've talked about off-peak shaving, right? Where the whole intent is always just in an emergency when they can't get it at a specific cost, which they would consider a fiscal emergency. So to me,
Not a
we-
fiscal emergency.
well, but then we have to define emergency, right?
Okay,
So,
okay.
but let them run at full load, including backup generators, in order to fit within our standard
Okay.
for measurement at different periods within a 24-hour period or whatever.
Although if they're running at their full capacity, I mean, like, and this is just displaying maybe my ignorance on how this works, but isn't that going to be the highest level you're going to get? Is that going to change depending on the time of day and the direction of the wind? And like, I mean, if you get that number, do you really need to measure it hour by hour throughout the week? Or
You
do you
don't.
want
So-
to just get that number along
Right.
with the
So
weekly
we're
reading?
basically saying we need a photograph, not a movie, right? We need to measure it at full peak power, including power backups. Or we'll say at full peak power and then at full peak power with backups within those two, photographs. That's how I would measure it.
So you want these two snapshots in addition to
Yes.
the time, the measurements over time.
We have to go to an outside consultant for this. No, I'm
Well, that's the other
serious.
question. Can the city of Groton or the town of Groton, you can have that, you can have the standard, are you going to be able to enforce it?
But to me, it's simply prior to its use, right? It's just like I'm not gonna give you a building, I'm not gonna give you a use permit until you've measured that.
That's all.
That's what we're saying. Yes.
So
Yep.
They get to prove
don't
it.
we have the right to have the applicant pay for that service?
Or applications.
Yeah.
So if an
He's got a
application
building.
comes in, we can get a third-party review at the applicant's expense.
But he's gonna need a special permit.
Right.
Isn't that an
Right.
application?
But what we're talking about right now is before you get a certificate of occupancy. So you've already got your land use approval and you've got your building permit, and now you want your certificate of occupancy, and you need to show that you're not increasing the noise above.
Right.
We don't have the ability to hire a consultant under those circumstances,
No.
at least not now. Think about, but we don't under the current ordinance, so I need to think about how we would do that. Because, yeah, we don't have the technical expertise.
No.
Maybe some of the building officials do, okay, but I know the planners.
Well, I wouldn't think. Yeah, I wouldn't think the building official.
Honestly, at this point, it's not that hard.
Oh, yeah, you
I have an app. It's not,
Available?
yes, how good it is, I don't know, but it's pretty good and it's an app.
So we'll hire Hal.
Cannot do.
It's a conflict of interest.
All right. So we will take another stab at noise with that direction. That seems pretty clear. In terms of sustainability, so for the time being, we left the net zero target per Hal's suggestion. We have added that could be phased in over time, over a 10-year period. So wanted to see how people feel about that. And again, given the context of everything else we've discussed today, is that still very important to you? And do you think this phasing is reasonable?
I don't understand what you've written here, quite honestly, how it's going to work. Does that mean you can go and pollute for the first 9 years and then the 10th year, you clean it up and you're meeting your target here, for example?
It's phased in.
And is that how it really works, that you phase this in, or do you try to achieve closer to net zero at the get?
But is it really of concern? I
It
don't,
is,
I think.
well, oh, go ahead. Finish your
No,
sentence.
I just think with these type of data centers that we're talking about, the power usage is gonna be very low. We're not talking.
I don't know what the carbon output is. I really don't.
I mean, again,
Might
we're
be-
talking about a much smaller scale here. than we had been discussing initially. I mean, certainly when we're talking, if you're talking about a large scale standalone, I think having these strict targets was a good thought. For these smaller things, I mean, again, you're now meaning like you're probably about the same as other types of industrial uses in terms of your output. And so like, is that even fair? Is this something that you want to apply to other industrial uses in the town? So from my perspective, you're hitting a point now where we would be potentially adding requirements for, this one use, and then perhaps having other industrial uses in town that, aren't subject to it, but are potentially causing more of a carbon footprint.
But I don't, okay.
Maybe this goes to the size thing again, or it's small, you don't care.
Oh.
But otherwise, and when excuse gets larger, because at some point, if we own the site that became
Mhm.
where the uproar happened, if they were set up 20 arc welding bays, soaking up, I don't know how much electricity those things use, but it's a lot, we wouldn't have had this discussion.
But I don't know, you say net zero, but even if you have a small one, and it's like having a bunch of diesel generators going, I don't know what it's like. That's the problem. It's really, I don't have any information on this to say, okay, if it's small, is it polluting more than, certainly more than an office building or more than something else? We don't really know what the scale is on this. And so when we talk about net zero, yeah, that's to get it to what we're trying to do with other things, right? Cars, et cetera, et cetera. But if there's some other thing we should be using, I guess we need some information. Because I have maybe they're as clean as they come from, maybe they're net zero to start with, a smaller one, but I don't know. Maybe they pollute a lot more per square foot than a really big one. I don't know the answer to that. So it'd be really helpful to have that information, I think. And then we
Again,
would
you're not going to
know
necessarily
because we
have to know all that up front, so long as you put the onus on the applicant to show to your satisfaction that they can do it. And there are a million different ways that they could do it.
Well, I don't want to put an unrealistic onus on an applicant. I'd like to do something that makes sense, and I think we need some information. At least I do. It should be hopefully it's easy to get, and it's an easy answer, but I don't have any information on it.
Well, I don't understand why you're saying, you even know what the carbon
Yeah,
use is. Because you've got nuclear power, you got water, hydraulic power.
Oh, if you're just using electric, well, that could be
That's
the
all
answer.
It's electric.
Well, but that could be the answer.
Electric.
So there's no
If you
diesel.
use squirrels on a treadmill.
Is that right? There's no diesel generators in these.
No,
They never kick in.
only for backup.
Well, for backup,
emergency
they do.
use.
Power.
In which case they
And
still
I
bill.
think that should be added to this list of
Yeah.
9 items
Yeah.
in your power. Or 10
Yeah,
items.
yeah, backup
Yeah,
is
and
a
I think
different story.
And if
Well,
we can, whatever it is, you move the grid towards something that's net zero, that's where we want to go and we're gonna cover
Yeah.
this.
One
So
thing
if-
shouldn't be any different than whatever else you use power for.
Yeah.
Whatever.
One thing that's in here, and maybe the idea is we're kind of salivating at the idea of here, where you start kicking out, getting into this much more into this kind of power, but maybe one thing that's in here, which says to do it on site. I mean, the where was that now? The noise. Shall be demonstrated. You can do it any number of ways. And the idea being that it'd be on site. Well, it doesn't have to be on site. Was it? Here it is.
so I have 2 documents regarding this, right? So the first document which I'm going to send you is, it talks about the tiers and the definitions, right? So they call it a hardened data center. That's the best one I get as far as corporate data centers, and it gives a definition for that. And then on sustainability and some of the metrics like net zero, I'm going to send you something from Data Center Frontier as a group, and there's 5 really great metrics. One is energy, one's greenhouse gas, one's water consumption, one is waste, and one is land and biodiversity metrics. And gives us some definitions here that, again, I'm not saying they're a standard, but it provides us at least a metric as far as this is concerned. And Jeff Davis, I think, possibly with these two documents, it answers a lot of the questions that we're talking about here, because Sue's right. There's a lot here. If we're going to go down this road of sustainability, what it really means, ISO 30134 family, et cetera, carbon gas. There's a lot there if we're going to go down this road.
And again, this is one of those topics, and you're gonna get tired of me saying this, but particularly now that we're not going the full scale, large standalone data centers, which do, I think, have a legitimate, difference in terms of their impacts. I want you to look at what Kevin's about to send through the lens of, are we comfortable applying these standards to whatever might be causing these issues within town, and not make them specific to data centers, particularly, given the scale that we're talking about. Because I really do want to caution you, like, you could get into trouble of saying, like, why are you targeting us when these guys are doing a lot worse than we are?
Thank you.
And so the point becomes, I think, the emphasis is that we don't have permitted use within the town of Groton. It's just that simple. We have permitted use under special permit for accessory data centers, and then everything flows beyond that. So if we limit it to such a way where we feel comfortable, if it's square feet, and take a look at my definitions that I'm going to send out first thing tomorrow morning. But I don't know if we have the problem, right? So I agree, net zero is good, but it falls within one of these 5 metrics. And how big a problem is it with these small accessory data centers that are what we now call hardened data centers because they're attached to one business? I don't think it's a big problem, frankly.
I don't think it is either.
Yeah.
So again, if you're, like, I would love to see your the sustainability article. I would love to think about how the town might adopt that across industrial uses. My gut is also that net zero, even phased in over 10 years, is pretty onerous for the scale of data centers we're talking about now.
Absolutely.
I'll be interested to see your stuff, Kevin.
So I can just distribute this through Debbie Schaffler.
Great. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, got it.
And she can forward a copy to Jeff Davis.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say if we decide to not pursue this, should at least have some commentary somewhere saying why we didn't and why we think it's a good idea, regardless. And we had no good way of doing it now without making it town-wide, which
Right.
which we'd love to do.
Like somewhere, I'd like the applicant to at least address these 5 metrics for sustainability.
And that's one thing you can do. You can at least say, I mean, this was easier when, you had had to have an agreement with the town. But the way we structured this, that's no longer going to be the case. But yeah, you can say your application must demonstrate how you're going to address these issues. Even if you don't say you have to hit these targets, you can say, we want to know how you're addressing these sustainability issues. And I think that's also something that you could ask of all applicants for industrial uses. But yeah, I'd be very curious to see those. I'm based on what you're describing, I think there's probably a good way to address that universally.
Right. I'm going to send it
But
right
we
now.
do have there's an asphalt plant in town though, too, so.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to
Talk
be-
about a
we have to
nasty
be
use.
Realist. So, although I'm sure they have super cleaning equipment and all that too, so.
Which they can.
That's why all boundaries.
I guess, one question I had on the noise standards, I know that's been coming up for, at least 5 years. What would be the way forward on that to try to get a noise ordinance? Because it keeps being a issue Um, As we go topic by topic, it's always seems to be an issue in there.
And ordinances are adopted by the town council.
Mm,
So, you know, maybe during one of the full council meetings where they have public communications, and, you know, if you actually came, I think you'd have a better effect to actually come with something specific rather than we need a noise ordinance.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah.
Like some language even proposed
Exactly.
from
Here's what.
best practice.
Okay, and I think we could easily adopt it to Groton. It's something, but ultimately they have to adopt it.
right.
You
I
know,
think
base such ordinance somewhere. I mean,
Oh, there are example ordinances from all over. I think you can also concurrently strengthen what you have in the in your nuisance ordinance within zoning, within the regulations. There are probably ways you can make that stronger, but I agree with Deb that if you really want, if you want noise to be enforceable, the police have got to be able to enforce it. You don't want your zoning officer being in charge of that because it's, you know, the noise is never a problem when your zoning officer is on the clock.
I understand, but if you had, maybe Deb, if you have some examples of ones that you would think are really top notch, I'd be interested after all this time.
As an ordinance or as a zoning regulation?
Or
Ordinance,
Yeah.
that way we can.
Yeah.
As individuals.
Offer it up
Otherwise offer
if
it,
we want.
yeah. Otherwise they won't do it.
that would be really, yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that.
We have a 7:30
We do,
time limit.
we do. So I think we've got one more
One
page,
more.
right? Monday, there we go.
Okay, couple other issues related to data centers, if we may. Abandonment, cessation of use. I recommend that we just delete this section. Again, I think that's important when it's a large standalone use. For what we're describing, I don't think this is needed. If you feel otherwise, I would then strongly encourage you to only have this apply if they're located outside a building. I don't think there's really any need for us to mess with what's happening on the inside of these buildings.
Yeah, if it's associated with an existing business here, I don't, that's a problem.
But if it's on the outside, standalone, we would.
Yeah, but it's still it would be on land use that's
Right.
owned by a building. The data centers that the governor was trying to attract,
Mm.
there was no property necessarily owned, so
Mm.
no property.
True.
Hmm?
True. And
That's why you needed the
wouldn't the,
commissioning.
well, wouldn't the state have a number of requirements too? I mean, you can't just walk away with anything
Well, that's
problematic
why
there and all.
the business would make sure
Yeah.
that it was cleaned up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's a modest sized business, we're not talking monstrous,
No.
then there's just no harm. And they're gonna want the equipment. If they don't want the equipment, someone else will buy
They're
it.
gonna, yeah,
And we get a warehouse.
they're gonna take care of it.
Right.
A very well air conditioned warehouse.
Right?
And there's nothing like asbestos type issues or anything like that
No.
in data centers, once they're abandoned.
It would only just, once you pull
I
the,
don't know.
once you pull the equipment up. there.
Mm.
This seems to me to be the same as what you were speaking of before, Jeff, where we don't require that of a lot of any other business, I don't
Mm.
believe. And so
Yeah. This is true.
unless we're willing, and I think that I'm fine deleting it.
Great, thank you for that. And then we already discussed this a bit. I think we're comfortable on this point. But to reiterate, we've set a cap at no more than 20% of the gross floor square feet of the principal use. And we've reduced that ultimate cap to 10,000 square feet or less. It had been 20,000 square feet, which I think was making some of you a little uncomfortable. And again, we had noted, and I think Sue brought this up, I don't know if Deb, you have any contacts at any of the local companies. We want to do a quick survey of how they use data centers today or how they think they may use them in the future. But I'd be happy to work with you on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I do think it'll be important to explicitly state that, of course, any data center is still subject to dimensional building and lot standards. So it's not as though, oh, you can have all this square footage. Well, yeah, sure, if it fits into the building coverage that's allowed within the underlying zoning. So we'll just make double sure that people are clear that that still applies. So any issues with
Sounds
that
good.
approach to size?
I don't think so.
Sounds good.
But how big is this building? Do you know?
Oh.
Well, I mean, this is 50 by 30 here. So I'm just trying to extrapolate. And I think this is still a pretty big building. So
Pretty big,
It is.
bigger than it
so
looks.
it's not talking about the height of it. So it's
Well, it goes
just 10,000
underground,
square feet.
Square feet is pretty.
So
multiple story.
Yeah, you can't.
Right, good. So we have a little bit more research to do. We'll very much look forward to seeing the articles that Kevin sends around. But I think I have pretty clear instructions on most points for a third draft of this. So
Yeah.
thank
And I
you
did
for
already
your
send them to
work.
Debbie and to Deb Jones, and they're pretty specific to the questions, Jeff, that were asked by the commission members tonight. So
Great.
I think it fills the gaps well.
So we are approaching the end. Probably don't have time for, a substantive conversation around short-term rentals. And I know Deb was planning on us spending the bulk of the time on cannabis and data centers. We can try to get those wrapped up. With your permission, if you think it would be helpful, I can go through the remaining policy questions for short-term rental as a planting of the seeds for the next time we meet. Does that make sense? Or is there anything in particular that you would like to focus on our last few minutes?
I think the package has enough in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's good.
At least it did to me. I thought it was, the package is what we should be talking. Whether we like it or.
Hmm.
It's fairly clear. Confusing.
So are you all interested in having another workshop in December? Sure. Okay. Just
Sure.
She said.
figure out dates and get a poll out.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
have to bring sugar cookies.
We just need one.
Yes, just one meeting, the 13th. I
The
think.
13th, that's right.
So I'll accept a motion for adjournment then.
So moved.
Second?
All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Before we pack up,